Okay, so in this video, we are actually going to do the mustache and the inner hairs of the nose. These are the two things, and similar step as we've already seen before. We are actually going to start with the mask. Obviously, I'm not going to show you how I have set up the image texturing process because at this point, I think you should already know. Instead of the image, you can actually just use the weight paint if you really want to, or maybe the color attributes. But in this particular case, because I actually had no idea that I can do that, I am just using the image texture. You can actually do whatever you like to do. Let's actually start with the mask. As you can see, this is actually the mask that I've created, and in the future I'm basically just going to change the mask as well. So this is also something that you can do, by the way. So I'm basically just fixing the mask right now. As you can see, this is something that you can do whenever you actually want to do, because this whole process is basically pretty flexible and you can actually just change these things whenever you really want. That's basically what I've did. Now I am actually back to making the mustache. So pretty much the same thing. I've already created the mask. So now I'm actually just adding the hairs. Okay, now you can actually see the settings. Basically, I am unchecking all the interpolate option. And right now, obviously, the first thing is to see whether the length of the hairs are actually correct or not. And in this case, you can see that's basically what I'm checking right now. The points per curves are 48. If you really want to, you can increase or decrease it. Totally up to you. I just felt like that it actually worked. So I'm using this setting. I'm now setting the hair profile. So pretty much the same thing that I've actually done before. And you can clearly see that I am actually playing around with the settings. Pretty much the same thing. And it's just me setting up the hairs. So these are the settings that I am actually using. Interpolate, obviously, we're gonna have to use it. We have actually painted the mask and now we are actually going to be using that mask. The reason that you cannot actually see the hairs right now is because you have to increase the density. Right now the density is actually at 10, so we need to increase it. So this is basically what we have, and now we can actually just start grooming the hairs. As you can see, we already have the sculpt that we can follow, and this is pretty much going to be the similar thing that we've already done with the head hairs or the beard hair. It's just going to be the same thing. Okay, so right now, as you can see, that I am basically just lowering down the viewport, like the hairs view, not the view, but the number of hairs, so that the viewport is actually a bit smoother, so that the grooming itself would not be laggy. And now we can actually just continue on grooming. So you can clearly see that I'm basically just trying to match the sculpt right now. I think you can actually try and lower down the points in the hair curves itself, because right now I think the points are actually a bit too much for the mustache, but it didn't really matter that much in the end. Maybe for the ease of grooming, you can actually try and changing the points, but just for the sake of the look, it didn't really matter that much. The 48 that I'm working with right now actually worked pretty nicely. So it is totally up to you. Just experiment on your own. Obviously, you need to make sure that the settings that actually works for you is the best settings and not the settings that I am showing you. I'm just showing you why I have chosen my settings and stuff. You can see how the mustache is looking right now, and we definitely cannot expect it to look pretty nice with just one guide hairs. And if you were to just mirror it, it would become two guides there. In this particular case, we have four guides. So obviously, with the four guides, you cannot actually expect the mustache to look, pretty perfect or nice, or what are other words that you can actually give to the mustache? Again, the process is pretty simple. We are gonna have to add enough guides that in the end the mustache would actually start to look nicer. Right now, obviously, it is not looking nice because we only have two guides. We are eventually gonna get there. So one of the cool thing about this new hair system is that with the guide, the children hair also basically changes its length, and that's pretty nice because as you can see that I basically have shortened down this particular guide, and the surrounding hairs also have obeyed that, also have changed its length, and that's pretty nice. Okay, so right now the idea is to basically create a clump at the edge of the mustache so that there is actually going to be a pointy kind of a clumpy kind of a thing going on. And that's basically what the idea is. And as you can see that I'm actually adding the clump in order to do that. Obviously, with the image texture, it is not going to work. So again, I have to do the same setup. I am gonna be, using the name attributes, and the image texture is actually gonna go into the density so that the clumping is basically going to work in the mustache, and that's what's happening. Okay, right now, as you can see that some of the hairs are actually growing outside of the mask, and I think I must have accidentally painted a pixel or something. So I'm basically just removing it right now. As you can see, nothing really special going on, but you can see how the clumping is basically working. And at the edge of the mustache, like at the outermost part of the mustache, you can see the clump. This clump is something that I actually wanna have in the mustache in the end. So I actually need to add a mask for the clump as well so that I can basically remove some of the clumping from the middle. The clumping at the edge would basically stays. This is basically the next thing that I'll do. Okay, so I am actually kind of done with the grooming for now, and I need to create a clump mask. So that's basically what I'm doing right now. As you can see that I've already talked about it, by the way. I don't really want clumping in the middle as much as I want it on the edges. So this is what I'm gonna do. I am gonna be adding a clump mask, and right now I'm not painting it, but I am definitely gonna be painting it in the future. So as you can see right now, I am actually just copy pasting the setup that I have created. The idea is again to just use it as a clump mask. Okay, so right now the clump is actually at its 100% because the mask is white. So I don't know why I am actually getting confused. I need to replace it with the clump. As you can see, the clump mask image texture. And now I can actually go into the texture painting mode and start painting it. So yeah, you're gonna see that I basically would add more clump on the edges. So let me just start doing it. As you can see where I am adding the clumping and where I am gonna be leaving it. So this is one of those areas where I actually want more clumping, as you can clearly see. Because this is something that you can, usually see in the mustache, that this part especially gets more because males generally groom this part a lot with their fingers, and because of that a clump basically starts to appear in this particular area. So I'm also just trying to do the same. And in this particular case I thought that the hairs were growing from a bit too much, like I didn't really wanted that particular area to have some hairs, so I have actually erased the mask. But yeah, you can see how much of the clump I have created, and most of the clump is actually at the edges. So this is something that I've talked about that I'm gonna do, and I basically did. The change in the mask, as you can see that I've just changed a little bit of settings in the nodes. After that, by the way, I can talk about it right now. Eventually, in the end, I am basically just going to apply all the modifiers, and after that, I'm going to manually be creating a little bit of variation and clumping. You can see that wherever I actually want clumping, I am basically just painting it with white. So again, similar like workflow that I've already shown you. Okay, now I'm actually adjusting this particular guide because I'm looking at the reference and I'm just trying to match it as close as I possibly can with the reference, because obviously references are like one of the most important thing for an artist. And matching the reference is basically why the reference is there in the first place. So I am actually doing that. Okay, so there is this hair that you can actually see growing, and I just wanted to remove it because obviously you don't want your mustache hair to be growing out of a beard. And I think that's basically what I've did right now. Now I'm actually gonna be changing the clump mask. So as you can see, I'm basically increasing the strength at the edges again so that it actually starts to look a bit better. Okay, so in this particular case, I've already talked about it that I basically want a clump in this particular area, and in order to do that, I actually have to lower down the size of this particular guide because when I was actually working, previously, it just didn't really turning out to be nice. So I think that lowering down the size is actually gonna work. So that's basically what I'm doing right now to basically create that clumping effect because that clumping effect is actually pretty important because that is something that I can see clearly in my reference and I basically just want to create recreate the same thing. Again, you can see that I am actually still trying to do something similar. I am still trying to create this clumping kind of a effect in this particular area. So yeah, this is basically the whole idea behind me doing what I'm doing right now. If you were to feel like that, if you're actually kind of confused on what I'm trying to achieve, this is basically what I'm trying to achieve right now. Okay, so at this particular point, I felt like that I've actually groomed it enough and it's time to, add the noise modifier. So as you can see that I basically added this noise modifier and I have preserved the length because obviously it was spiking a bit too much. So I had to do it. And now I'm actually just gonna play with the scale and play with the scale along curve setting to make sure that I basically get what I get a natural kind of a look. So that's what I'm actually trying to achieve. Again, this is just a trial and error thing. Make sure that you actually play around the settings and come up with the setting that actually works for your own project. For me, obviously, the mustaches are a bit too longer than usual. I mean, you do actually get to see these kind of mustache, but most people don't have that kind of a mustache, right? These are some of the settings that are working for me. Maybe it won't actually work for you. So just play around with the settings. As you can see, the settings that I am actually trying to change. And now I have added the trim hair curves modifier. So just trying to get more randomness in terms of length of the hairs. So that's what I'm doing right now. You can see that I am actually just changing the setting in this particular modifier as well. By the way, you can just look what I'm trying to change and you can also see the result that it is giving me. So figure out on your own, the settings that's going to work for you. I actually cannot give you the exact settings that have worked for me because if I'm being honest, after I am done with the groom, I basically have gone backstage and tweaked some more settings. So the settings that you actually see in these recordings are not the final settings that I actually use, because behind the scenes I did actually have changed some of these stuff. But in the end, I am actually going to be providing you with the files. So if you really want to see the exact final settings or the amount of modifiers that I've actually used, you can just open up the files and just look at it on your own. Right now, you can see what I am trying to do. I have added the clump modifier in the end after the noise, and that's the kind of look it is actually giving to the mustache. Now you can see that I'm actually creating another mask, and this mask is actually gonna be for the noise, like for the mustache noise. So there are some places where I actually want noise, and there are some places where I don't want noise. And for that, I am actually creating this mask. Again, this mask is also gonna have strength in it. So if you were to paint with pure white, the strength is actually going to be at 1, and if you were to paint it with the grayish kind of a value, the strength is actually going to be lowered. So this mask is basically going to be doing two jobs. One, it is going to tell Blender where you want noise, and two, it is going to tell Blender how much of the strength you want in that particular noise. So these are the two things that I'm going to do. Let's actually see how it would look. So you can see that I'm actually painting it, and as I am painting, you can also see the value in the color. So this is actually just me trying to get the right amount of strength. If I'm actually painting, as you can see, the hairs are changing because we are using the noise. It is telling Blender to add the noise in the area where we are painting with that particular color. This is basically what I'm doing. I really hope, by the way, that it didn't really get confusing because of how I am actually speaking. This is basically what the idea is right now. I have already created a clump mask, and now I am actually doing the same thing for the noise. And this is also the same thing that I've actually done with the head hairs and the beard. So I really hope that this is not something confusing. Okay, so now what I'm actually trying to do is I'm basically trying to create the flyaway hairs, flyaway the noisy hairs. And as you can see, I'm actually doing the same setup right now. So this is basically again the similar thing that I've already done before. Again, pretty similarly adding the color ramp, and as I'll basically just push the black flag, you can see that flyaway hairs have been created and a few of the hairs are actually getting affected. This is basically the same setup that I have created previously. So you can see that changing the value of the color are also changing the strength. So this is also something that I do, and I've already done this before, but I am like still saying it just in case. Okay, so right now, as you can see that in the middle, the hairs are actually kind of separated. So I am just adding a guide in the middle that is actually going towards the center. So that was basically the idea at this particular point. So this is the clump modifier, and this geometry node setup is for the clump modifier. And as you can see that I've added a clump, not the clump, but the color ramp node. The idea is to increase the strength a little bit. That's why you can see that I'm increasing the value of the black so that I basically can get a little bit of clumping everywhere. And as you can see how it is actually affecting the hairs on the mustache. So yeah, that's pretty much what the idea is. Okay, so for some reason, the mask that I've created for uh, the growth of the hairs of the mustache, I think that mask is like I think I must have done something wrong, and because of that, you can say that the hairs are actually coming out of the places where they should not actually have been. So I am basically just removing that from the mask by painting it with pure black. Okay, so now what I actually want to do, I basically want to, blur this mask out. And the reason is pretty simple. I basically want to create a transition between the hair and the skin so that it just does not appear that I basically have just sticked, a fake mustache. I actually want to give a hint that mustache is gradually, growing and like you get the idea, why I mean, there is only one reason why you actually blur this mask out, and I really don't think that I actually need to explain the reason. That's basically what I've just did right there, and now I am actually just collapsing the modifiers. I have no idea why, but I have just duplicated the noise modifier, and I think the idea is to create a seed value. As you can see, I am basically just changing the seed so that different hairs could be used as a flyaway hairs, and that's basically I am doing to create more randomness and more natural looking look. There is one thing that I definitely want to say. You can see that the thickness of the hairs of the mustache and the beard is actually pretty different. So I think I must have, behind the scene changed that. There are some little tweaks that I've done behind the scene, and it just was not possible to show you everything that I've changed, because otherwise the videos would have gone a bit longer, and the course is already pretty long, and I didn't really wanted to add that to the length of the course. These are some of the stuff that I've actually did behind the scene, and again I've talked about it that you are gonna get the files. So if you really want to, you can actually just check out all the changes that I've did. You can also see the final, like the modifiers text and the settings, if you really want to implement the same thing in your own file. Right now, as you can see, that I'm still just trying to change some settings to figure out which settings are actually gonna work for my character. And yeah, this is something that basically just goes on for pretty long. Even after I'm done recording, I go behind the scene, and I always change these small little settings. So this is something that I do a whole lot of. And right now, what you can see, I've already talked about it. I have basically applied all the modifiers instead of the profile modifier. And now I basically want to manually groom this particular part, because you do actually have the option to do that. If you remember and have used this particular system when Blender have implemented it for the first time, you actually didn't had any modifiers, and you have to do everything manually, which we did with the eyebrows and the eyelashes. So this is basically the same thing. I have applied all the modifiers, and now I actually wanna make this a bit more clumpier. So in order to do that, I'm basically just going to do it manually. And now I am only selecting this particular part so that I can manually pinch these particular part up. Obviously the strength is a bit too much, so we're gonna have to deal with that. And now that the strength is actually been lowered down, you can see that I am pinching it manually. So even after we have so many modifiers, you can actually approach your grooming like this. So it is totally up to you. I think that I didn't really had to do it this way. I could have also achieved the same thing with the guides, but it is totally fine. It's just a portrait, and nothing is actually going to be simulated, so you can do whatever you really want to do at this point. And yeah, after I am done with that, I am also going to be grooming the inside of the nose hair, so the nostril hairs basically. But yeah, right now you can see that I'm basically just doing this manually. So Okay, so I am actually kind of done with the mustache hair, and now we are actually gonna do the nostril hairs. So for that, the process is again going to be pretty similar. We are going to, I think, create a mask, if I'm not wrong. Let's actually see. I don't remember. Maybe I have groomed it manually, like I have added all the hairs manually. Maybe that's the case. But if I can remember it correctly, I think I do add a mask. So this particular part is actually sped up, and again the reason is because we have done this step so many times. So I think it's totally fine for me to do it. We have a mask, and now we are basically just gonna do the same thing that we have already done so many times. And let's just start doing that. So as you can see that I have added the interpolate hair curves, and now I need to increase the density so that I can actually see the hairs. The hairs are kind of like this. You can see the grooming is not going to be that important. I just need to set up a direction. So for example, in this particular case, you can see that I am just setting up the direction at the outside pretty straight. There is not going to be that much amount of grooming that's going to happen. Most of the weight of this groom is actually going to be held by modifiers. So yeah, this is what we are going to be doing. Right now, you can see how the hairs are looking. I think this is pretty much it for the groom, but now we are going to go into the modifiers and start adding the modifiers to make it look a bit better. So right now you can see that I added the noise, but obviously the size of the noise is a bit too much. So I need to lower down the scale. And I am also thinking about adding the rolls and stuff. Just I am just experimenting at this point because you know how curly, how noisy, and how like rolly kind of a thing you see in the nose here. So I am actually trying to achieve the same thing. So in order to do that, I am basically just trying all the modifiers that I can get my hand on. And in this particular case, you can see that I have rolled the hairs, but in the end it just didn't work, so I had to remove this particular modifier. But in this case, as you can see, I am actually trying out some settings. But yeah, I am gonna be removing this modifiers. I think only gonna be using the noise or maybe the curl. I cannot remember, but we'll see. Right now, as you can see that I've actually removed the roll modifier and I am back to the noise. So obviously we're gonna have to increase the scale. As you can see that I am increasing the scale so that I can get fine little details. Right now we are not obviously getting those. Also, the factor needs to be lower down. In this particular case, I am just changing all these settings, just trying to figure out which one's gonna work better. And again, I have talked about this that most of it is just trial and error stuff. You cannot really remember the settings. Maybe if you were to, rehearse the tutorials of the course, maybe you can in that particular case, but I have not rehearsed it. So this is actually just me doing all the things on the flow. As you can see that I need to lower down the factor. I basically have just duplicated the modifier and changed the seed value to give more variation and to give more randomness. So yeah, this is actually again something similar. Now curl hair curves. So I was actually trying to add some curls, but I think in the end it just didn't work. If I can remember it correctly, so I had to remove it, or maybe not. I cannot really remember. But yeah, this is just the trial and error stuff. Experiment on your own and figure out if these settings actually are working for you or not. In my case, they worked pretty well, so I have stick to them. Obviously, I've already talked about it so many times that you're gonna get these files, so you can just look at those files if you really want to. I think in this particular case, the curl hair curves modifier is not really working that well. So I would have actually just removed it by now, but I am still trying to figure out if they are gonna work or not. But yeah, as you can see that I've actually removed it. That's basically how I have approached this, grooming thing. I have done so many of the trial and error stuff and tried to make sure that it looks nice. It looks natural to what we see, similar to what we see, not natural to what we see. This is basically how the groom is looking right now. And if you really want to, you can actually just leave it right here, be done with, because in the end, you don't really see that much like nostril hairs. So yeah, this is totally up to you. But in my case, as you can see that I am still adding some modifiers. I am still trying to give them more natural looking look. This video is also about to end, and this is pretty much it for the mustache and the nostril hairs. And I am just gonna see you in the next one now.